It is not possible to put into words just how truly horrific and terrifying the secrets that lie buried within the deepest vaults of the Imperial Palace really are. Hidden away in chambers so secure that even the High Lords of Terror fear to speak their names, protected by defenses that would make a Space Marine fortress monastery look like a children's playground, sits perhaps the most dangerous document in the entire history of mankind. This is not some ancient relic from the dark age of technology, nor is it a chaos artifact that threatens to corrupt all who look upon it. No, this is something far more sinister, far more apocalyptic in its implications. This is the Terminus decree, and it may very well be the Imperium's ultimate doomsday weapon. For over 10,000 years, this document has remained sealed away, its contents known only to a select few individuals who have sworn sacred oaths never to speak of what they have seen. The very existence of the Terminus decree is a closely guarded secret, whispered about only in the darkest corners of the imperial hierarchy. Some say it contains the Emperor's final contingency plan. Others believe it holds the key to mankind's salvation or damnation. But what we do know for certain is that whatever is written upon those ancient pages is so catastrophic, so world-shattering in its implications, that it has remained unopened for millennia. The story of the Terminus decree begins in the closing days of the Horus Heresy, when the Emperor of mankind lay dying upon the Golden Throne after his final confrontation with his most beloved son turned traitor. As his broken body was being prepared for its eternal imprisonment within the life-sustaining mechanisms of the throne, the Emperor supposedly dictated one final set of instructions to his most trusted servant, Malcador the Sigillite. These instructions were so terrible, so unthinkable in their scope, that Malcador himself is said to have wept as he transcribed them. The document was sealed with the Emperor's own psychic might, wrapped in wards and protections that would make it impossible for anyone but the most desperate circumstances to break them open. It was then placed in a vault so deep within the Imperial Palace that its location is known only to the Captain General of the Adeptus Custodes, and perhaps one or two other individuals of the highest authority. The vault itself is said to be protected by defenses that would automatically kill anyone who approached without proper authorization. And even then, opening the decree would require specific conditions to be met. But what could possibly be so terrible that the Emperor himself, a being who had witnessed the rise and fall of countless civilizations, who had fought against the horrors of old night and seen the worst that humanity was capable of, would consider it a last resort? To understand this, we need to examine what we know about the Emperor's true nature and his plans for mankind. Throughout his long existence, the Emperor had always been a pragmatist above all else. He understood that sometimes terrible choices had to be made for the greater good, that individual lives meant nothing when weighed against the survival of the species as a whole. He had orchestrated the Thunder Warriors' creation and subsequent elimination when they were no longer needed. He had allowed the purging of entire worlds during the Great Crusade when they refused to comply with imperial rule. He had even been willing to sacrifice his own sons when they proved to be flawed or corrupted. Given this history, whatever the Terminus decree contains must be something so catastrophic that even the Emperor hesitated to implement it. Some scholars who have spent their lives studying fragments of information about the decree believe it contains instructions for the complete destruction of Terra itself. The theory goes that if chaos were ever to completely overrun the Imperium, if the forces of darkness were on the verge of claiming the Emperor's own throne world, then the decree would authorize the detonation of Terra's core, creating a psychic shockwave so massive that it would destroy not only the planet, but potentially damage the warp itself. Others believe the decree contains something even more sinister. There are whispers that the Emperor, in his final moments of consciousness, realized that his great work had been fundamentally flawed from the beginning, that humanity itself was incapable of achieving the greatness he had envisioned for the species. The decree, according to this theory, contains instructions for the systematic extermination of all human life in the galaxy, a final mercy killing to prevent the species from falling completely to chaos. But perhaps the most terrifying theory of all is that the Terminus decree contains the true nature of the Emperor's bargain with the Chaos gods. We know from various sources that the Emperor made some kind of deal with the ruinous powers during the creation of the Primarchs, and that this deal was somehow betrayed or broken. What if the decree contains the terms of a new bargain, one so terrible that the Emperor hoped it would never need to be invoked? What if it contains instructions for surrendering the entire Imperium to chaos in exchange for something even worse being prevented? The physical location of the Terminus decree has been the subject of intense speculation among Imperial scholars for millennia. Most believe it is kept in a vault somewhere deep beneath the Imperial Palace, in chambers that predate even the Emperor's arrival on Terra. These ancient vaults are said to contain relics and artifacts from the earliest days of human civilization, protected by technology that is beyond the understanding of even the Adeptus Mechanicus. The vault itself is described in fragmentary accounts as being sealed behind a door that bears no handle, no lock, no visible means of opening. The only way to gain entry is through the psychic presence of someone with the authority to open it. And even then, the defenses are said to be so elaborate that they would kill most intruders before they could even approach the door. Some accounts speak of servo skulls that patrol the corridors leading to the vault, programmed to attack anyone who lacks the proper authorization. Others mention automated defense systems that can distinguish between friend and foe through means that are not entirely understood. But even if someone were to somehow bypass all of these defenses and gain access to the vault, they would then face the challenge of actually opening the decree itself. The document is said to be sealed with the Emperor's own psychic might, wrapped in layers of protection that would require someone of immense psychic power to break. Some believe that only a Primarch could open it. Others think that it would require the combined psychic might of the most powerful psykers in the Imperium working together. The custodian of the Terminus decree has traditionally been the Captain General of the Adeptus Custodes, the Emperor's personal bodyguards who have protected him since before the Great Crusade. Each Captain General who has taken up the position has been briefed on the existence of the decree, though whether they are told its contents or simply its location is a matter of debate. What we do know is that every Captain General who has learned of the decree's existence has emerged from that briefing a changed man, bearing a weight of knowledge that has visibly aged them. Captain General Trajan Valoris, the current holder of this terrible burden, is said to have spent many sleepless nights standing guard over the vault containing the decree. Those close to him report that he sometimes speaks in his sleep about the final choice and the price of salvation. When questioned about these utterances, Valoris simply states that some knowledge is too dangerous to share, even among the Emperor's most trusted servants. Throughout the 10 millennia since the decree was sealed away, there have been several occasions when various imperial authorities have considered whether the time had come to open it. During the War of the Beast, when the largest orc invasion in imperial history threatened to overrun Terra itself, some members of the High Lords of Terra reportedly suggested that the crisis was severe enough to warrant opening the decree. Captain General Andronikos is said to have personally stood guard over the vault during this time, preventing anyone from approaching it. Again, during the Horus Heresy's immediate aftermath, when the Imperium was fracturing and Chaos warbands were striking deep into Imperial space, there were discussions about whether the decree should be opened. But each time, cooler heads have prevailed, arguing that whatever horrors the Imperium faced, they were not yet desperate enough to warrant whatever terrible solution the decree contained. The closest the Imperium has ever come to opening the Terminus decree was during the events of the 13th Black Crusade, when Abaddon's forces succeeded in destroying the fortress world of Cadia and tearing open the Great Rift. As warp storms raged across the galaxy and demon incursions erupted on thousands of worlds, some within the highest levels of Imperial command began to whisper that perhaps the time had finally come to consider the Emperor's final option. Captain General Valoris is reported to have actually stood before the vault containing the decree during the darkest days of the 13th Black Crusade, his hand hovering over the psychic locks that sealed it away. But even as reports came in of Terra itself being threatened by demonic incursions, even as the very foundations of the Imperium seemed to be crumbling around them, Valoris could not bring himself to break those ancient seals. In the end, the return of Robert Guilliman and his subsequent victories against the forces of chaos made the opening of the decree unnecessary. But the fact that the Captain General came so close to opening it speaks to just how desperate the situation had become. Some who were present during those dark days report that Valoris spent hours staring at the sealed vault, as if trying to peer through the ancient protections to glimpse what lay within. The psychological toll of guarding such a terrible secret cannot be understated. Every Captain General who has held the knowledge of the decree's existence has been changed by it. They speak of dreams filled with impossible choices, of visions of the Emperor in his final moments dictating those terrible words to Malcador. Some have reported that they can feel the decree calling to them during the darkest moments of Imperial history, as if the document itself somehow knows when the time might be right for its opening. This psychological burden extends beyond just the Captain General. The handful of other individuals who know of the decree's existence, including select members of the High Lords of Terra and perhaps one or two inquisitors of the highest authority, are said to be haunted by the knowledge. They form an informal group sometimes referred to as the bearers of the final secret, individuals who must carry the weight of knowing that there exists a solution to the Imperium's problems, but one that may be worse than any crisis they currently face. The security measures surrounding the decree go far beyond just physical defenses. The very knowledge of its existence is considered so dangerous that it is compartmentalized to an extreme degree. No written records of the decree exist anywhere in Imperial archives, and those who know of it are forbidden from speaking about it except under the most extreme circumstances. Even this compartmentalization is done carefully, with each individual knowing only as much as they absolutely need to know. There are protocols in place for the transfer of knowledge about the decree from one generation of Guardians to the next. When a new Captain General is appointed, they undergo a ritual known as the bearing of the burden, during which they are psychically shown the location of the vault and given the authorization codes needed to access it. This ritual is said to be one of the most closely guarded secrets of the Adeptus Custodes, known only to a select few who have undergone extensive psychic conditioning to prevent them from accidentally revealing the information. The existence of backup plans for accessing the decree has been a subject of much speculation. What would happen if the Captain General were killed or incapacitated during a crisis that required the decree to be opened? Some believe that there are contingency measures in place, perhaps involving multiple individuals who each hold part of the access codes, requiring them to work together to open the vault. Others think that the Emperor himself, even in his current state upon the Golden Throne, retains some measure of control over the decree's accessibility. One of the most disturbing aspects of the Terminus decree is the way it seems to influence those who know of its existence. Many of the Captain Generals who have guarded the secret have reported strange dreams and visions, as if the decree itself was somehow reaching out to them psychically. These dreams often involve scenarios where the Imperium is facing its final hour, and the dreamer is forced to make the terrible choice of whether to open the decree or allow humanity to fall to its enemies. Some of these visions are said to be remarkably specific, showing detailed scenarios of how various Imperial crises might unfold and at what point the decree would need to be opened. Captain General Kitten is reported to have had a recurring dream about standing before the Golden Throne as terror burned around him, with the Emperor's psychic presence urging him to break the final seal and save what can be saved. These dreams are so vivid and disturbing that many who experience them require extensive counseling from the most trusted chaplains of the Adeptus Custodes. The philosophical implications of the decree's existence are staggering. Its very presence suggests that the Emperor, for all his wisdom and foresight, recognized that there might come a time when even his great work would fail. That despite all his planning, all his sacrifices, all the terrible choices he made in the name of humanity's survival, there might still come a moment when an even more terrible choice would need to be made. This recognition flies in the face of much imperial doctrine, which holds that the Emperor's plan for humanity is perfect and will ultimately lead to the species' salvation. The existence of the decree suggests that even the Emperor acknowledged the possibility of failure, that he was pragmatic enough to prepare for the worst-case scenario, even as he worked toward the best possible outcome. Some imperial theologians who have been made aware of the decree's existence have struggled to reconcile its implications with their faith. How can they continue to preach about the Emperor's perfect plan for humanity while knowing that he himself prepared for the possibility that this plan might fail catastrophically? This has led to the development of several theological frameworks for understanding the decree, most of which involve viewing it as a test of humanity's faith or as a necessary component of some larger divine plan. The impact of the decree on imperial military doctrine has been subtle but significant. Knowing that there exists some ultimate solution to any crisis, no matter how desperate, has influenced the way imperial commanders approach seemingly hopeless situations. Rather than considering surrender or retreat, they often fight to the bitter end, knowing that there is always one more option available, even if it is too terrible to contemplate. This has led to both remarkable victories and horrific defeats. On one hand, imperial forces have achieved impossible victories through sheer determination, inspired by the knowledge that giving up is never truly an option. On the other hand, this same mindset has led to the needless sacrifice of countless lives in situations where a tactical retreat might have been the wiser course of action. The decree has also influenced imperial policy regarding the development of new weapons and technologies. Knowing that there exists some ultimate weapon or strategy that could end any conflict has made some imperial authorities less invested in developing new conventional weapon systems. Why spend resources on improving las guns and bolt rounds when you know there's already a solution that could end any war instantly? This complacency has been countered by those who argue that the very existence of the decree makes it even more important to develop conventional alternatives. They point out that any solution so terrible that the Emperor himself hesitated to use it should only be considered as an absolute last resort, making conventional military improvements even more critical. The psychological impact of the decree extends beyond just those who know of its existence. Throughout the Imperium, there are subtle signs that suggest the presence of some great secret at the heart of imperial power. The way certain high-ranking officials behave during crises, the inexplicable confidence shown by some commanders in the face of overwhelming odds, the careful compartmentalization of information at the highest levels of government all hint at the existence of something being held in reserve. This has led to the development of various conspiracy theories and underground movements within imperial society. Some believe that the Emperor has prepared a secret army of space marines hidden away somewhere, ready to emerge in humanity's darkest hour. Others think that there exists some ancient technology from the Dark Age that could instantly defeat any enemy. While these theories are wildly off the mark, they demonstrate the way the decree's existence creates ripples throughout imperial society, even when its true nature remains unknown. The question of what exactly the decree contains has been the subject of intense speculation and study by those few individuals who are aware of its existence. While no one except the Emperor and Malcador ever knew its full contents, there have been attempts to piece together clues from various sources to determine what terrible solution it might contain. One line of investigation has focused on the Emperor's known attitudes towards sacrifice and pragmatism. Throughout his long existence, he had shown himself willing to make any sacrifice, no matter how terrible, if it served the greater good of humanity. This suggests that the decree might contain instructions for some kind of ultimate sacrifice, perhaps involving the destruction of Terra itself or the willing surrender of humanity to some greater power. Another approach has been to examine the timing of the decree's creation. It was dictated in the Emperor's final moments of consciousness after he had witnessed the full horror of the Horus heresy and seen how completely his plans had been derailed by the corruption of his sons. This timing suggests that the decree might contain a response to the specific threat of chaos corruption, perhaps a way to permanently sever humanity's connection to the warp, even if it meant the destruction of all human psyches. The involvement of Malcador in the decree's creation has also been a subject of study. As the Emperor's most trusted advisor and the founder of the Inquisition, Malcador understood better than anyone the various threats facing humanity. His emotional reaction to the decree's contents suggests that whatever it contained went against his fundamental beliefs about the protection of human life and the preservation of imperial civilization. Some scholars have attempted to analyze the psychic emanations from the vault containing the decree, hoping to gain some insight into its contents without actually opening it. These efforts have been largely unsuccessful, as the Emperor's psychic wards around the document are too strong to penetrate. However, some psychers who have attempted this analysis have reported sensing overwhelming feelings of sadness and inevitability, as if the decree contained the acknowledgement of some terrible but necessary truth. The physical construction of the decree itself has been another area of investigation. From the few accounts that exist of its creation, we know that it was written on a material that predates the Age of Strife, possibly even from the Dark Age of technology. The writing implement used was supposedly one of the Emperor's own artifacts, imbued with his psychic essence to ensure that the words would remain legible for millennia. The language in which the decree was written is another mystery. While Malcador transcribed the Emperor's words, it's unclear whether he wrote them in High Gothic, ancient Terran languages, or perhaps some form of psychic script that could only be read by someone with the proper mental conditioning. Some believe that the decree might be written in multiple languages or even in a form that adapts itself to the reader, ensuring that whoever opens it will be able to understand its contents regardless of their linguistic background. The format of the decree has also been a subject of speculation. Is it a single page containing brief, terrible instructions, or is it a lengthy document explaining the reasoning behind the Emperor's final contingency plan? Does it contain just the instructions themselves, or does it also include the authorization codes needed to implement whatever solution it contains? Some accounts suggest that the decree might not be a traditional written document at all, but rather some kind of psychic recording that would transmit the Emperor's final instructions directly into the mind of whoever opens it. This would explain why the document needs to be protected by such elaborate psychic wards, and why only someone of sufficient psychic strength could access its contents. The question of who would have the authority to open the decree has been another area of intense debate among those who know of its existence. While the Captain General of the Adeptus Custodes is the traditional guardian of the document, it's unclear whether he would have the authority to open it unilaterally or whether it would require the consent of other imperial authorities. Some believe that opening the decree would require the unanimous consent of all the High Lords of Terra, ensuring that no single individual could make such a momentous decision alone. Others think that the Captain General would need the approval of the Emperor himself, somehow communicating with the Master of Mankind through his connection to the Golden Throne. The possibility that the decree could only be opened by a Primarch has also been discussed. Given that the Primarchs were the Emperor's own sons and shared his genetic template, they might possess the psychic strength needed to break through the wards protecting the document. The return of Robert Guilliman has made this possibility more relevant, as he is now the highest-ranking individual in the Imperium and might have both the authority and the power needed to access the decree. The timing of when the decree should be opened has been perhaps the most difficult question facing its guardians. What constitutes a crisis severe enough to warrant the implementation of whatever terrible solution it contains? Is the complete fall of Terra sufficient, or would it require the imminent extinction of the entire human species? Different guardians of the secret have had different opinions on this matter. Some have argued for a very high threshold, suggesting that the decree should only be opened if humanity is facing complete extinction with no other possible solutions available. Others have advocated for a lower threshold, arguing that waiting too long might make it impossible to implement whatever solution the decree contains. This debate has been complicated by the Emperor's own words when he dictated the decree. According to the fragmentary accounts that exist, he supposedly told Malcador that the decree should only be opened when all other hope is lost and the very soul of humanity hangs in the balance. But interpreting these words in the context of specific crises has proven to be extraordinarily difficult. The psychological preparation required to actually open and implement the decree has been another major concern. Whoever opens the document will likely be faced with instructions so terrible that they might hesitate to carry them out, even in the face of humanity's extinction. This has led to the development of mental conditioning protocols for potential openers of the decree, designed to prepare them psychologically for whatever they might find. These conditioning protocols are said to involve extensive meditation on the nature of sacrifice and the greater good, as well as psychic conditioning to strengthen the individual's resolve. Some accounts suggest that potential openers of the decree undergo simulated scenarios where they are forced to make increasingly difficult choices, culminating in exercises where they must choose between the survival of humanity and the preservation of everything they hold dear. The emotional toll of these preparations has been significant. Many of those who have undergone the conditioning report lasting psychological effects, including depression, anxiety, and a sense of disconnection from normal human concerns. Some have requested to be removed from consideration as potential openers of the decree, preferring to live with the uncertainty of not knowing its contents rather than the burden of being prepared to implement its solution. The possibility that the decree might be a deception or a test has been considered by some scholars. Could the Emperor have created a false decree containing false instructions designed to test the loyalty and judgment of future imperial leaders? This theory suggests that the real test is not in implementing whatever the decree contains, but in having the wisdom not to open it at all. This interpretation would be consistent with the Emperor's known fondness for complex psychological tests and his belief in the importance of human development and growth. Perhaps the decree is meant to force imperial leaders to find their own solutions to seemingly impossible crises, rather than relying on some predetermined answer from the past. However, this theory is contradicted by the genuine emotional distress shown by those who know of the decree's existence. If it were merely a test or a deception, it seems unlikely that it would cause such profound psychological effects on its guardians. The very real burden that these individuals carry suggests that whatever the decree contains, it is genuinely terrible and genuinely real. The question of whether the decree's contents might have changed over time has also been raised. While the physical document remains sealed, could the Emperor's psychic essence somehow modify its contents in response to changing circumstances? This would be consistent with his continued presence on the Golden Throne and his ongoing influence over imperial affairs. Some psychers who have attempted to analyze the decree's psychic emanations report that these emanations seem to fluctuate over time, becoming stronger during periods of particular crisis and weaker during periods of relative stability. This could suggest that the decree itself is somehow responsive to the state of the Imperium, perhaps automatically updating its contents based on current conditions. The development of alternative contingency plans has been another response to the burden of guarding the decree. Knowing that there exists some ultimate solution, but being unwilling to use it except in the most extreme circumstances, has led some imperial authorities to develop their own backup plans for dealing with existential crises. These alternative plans have included everything from the development of new weapon systems to the establishment of hidden colonies beyond the reach of chaos corruption. Some involve the preservation of human genetic material and cultural knowledge in secure locations, ensuring that even if the Imperium falls, something of humanity might survive to rebuild in the future. However, all of these alternative plans are acknowledged to be inferior to whatever solution the decree contains. They represent attempts to avoid having to open the decree rather than genuine substitutes for its contents. This has created a frustrating situation where Imperial leaders know that a perfect solution exists but are unable to access it except under the most dire circumstances. The international implications of the decree's existence have also been significant. While the document itself is a purely imperial secret, its existence affects the way the Imperium interacts with other galactic powers. The confidence that comes from knowing there is always one more option available has influenced imperial diplomatic and military strategies in subtle but important ways. Alien species that have had extensive contact with Imperial forces have sometimes noted a particular kind of confidence displayed by Imperial commanders, an unwillingness to consider final defeat even in the face of overwhelming odds. While these alien observers have no knowledge of the decree's existence, they have correctly identified one of its effects on Imperial behavior. This has led some alien species to develop their own contingency plans for dealing with what they perceive as Imperial unpredictability. Not knowing the source of this confidence, they have been forced to assume that the Imperium possesses some kind of secret weapon or strategy that they are unaware of. In some cases, this has actually worked in the Imperium's favor, causing enemies to be more cautious in their attacks than they might otherwise have been. The study of the decree has also influenced Imperial approaches to xenoarchaeology and the investigation of ancient human ruins. Knowing that the Emperor possessed knowledge and capabilities that modern Imperial authorities lack, has motivated extensive efforts to discover other hidden caches of ancient wisdom or technology that might provide alternatives to whatever terrible solution the decree contains. These efforts have been largely unsuccessful, but they have led to the discovery of various other ancient artifacts and technologies that have proven useful in their own right. Some scholars argue that this secondary benefit has been almost as valuable as the decree itself, as it has driven innovation and discovery that might not have occurred otherwise. The question of what will happen to the decree when the Emperor finally dies has been another source of anxiety for its guardians. While the Emperor's current state upon the Golden Throne is not technically life, as most would understand it, his psychic presence continues to maintain the wards protecting the decree. What would happen to these protections if his consciousness were to finally fade away? Some believe that the decree would become accessible to anyone with sufficient psychic power to break through weakened wards. Others think that the Emperor might have built in additional protections that would activate upon his death, perhaps making the document even more secure. A few have suggested that the Emperor's death might automatically trigger the implementation of whatever the decree contains, removing the need for anyone to make the terrible choice of opening it. This uncertainty has led to the development of protocols for dealing with the Emperor's potential death that go far beyond the obvious concerns about losing his psychic guidance and protection. The guardians of the decree have had to consider scenarios where they might suddenly find themselves with access to a document they had hoped never to open, or conversely, where they might lose access to a solution they desperately need. The training of successors and the preservation of knowledge about the decree has been another ongoing challenge. Each generation of guardians must pass on their knowledge to the next, while ensuring that the secret remains contained. This has required the development of extremely sophisticated security protocols and psychological conditioning techniques. The selection of individuals who can be trusted with knowledge of the decree's existence has become increasingly difficult as the Imperium has grown larger and more complex. During the early years after the heresy, the circle of those who knew the secret was small and tight-knit, making it easier to maintain security. As millennia have passed and the Imperium's power structure has evolved, it has become necessary to expand this circle slightly, increasing the risk of the secret being compromised. Each new person brought into the circle represents both a necessity and a security risk. They are chosen for their loyalty, their psychological stability, and their ability to handle terrible knowledge without breaking under the strain. Even so, several potential candidates have had to be excluded from consideration due to psychological instability that only became apparent after they were initially considered for inclusion. The impact of the decree on imperial military doctrine has been profound, even among those who are unaware of its existence. The knowledge that there is always one more option available has permeated imperial command structures, creating a culture of absolute determination that has become one of the Imperium's defining characteristics. This culture has produced remarkable military achievements, with imperial forces accomplishing impossible victories through sheer determination and refusal to accept defeat. However, it has also led to costly mistakes, as commanders have sometimes pressed forward with hopeless assaults when retreat would have been the wiser course of action. The balance between these positive and negative effects has been a subject of ongoing debate among imperial military theorists. Some argue that the psychological benefits of knowing there is always hope outweigh the costs of occasionally poor tactical decisions. Others contend that the culture of absolute determination has become a liability that causes unnecessary casualties and wastes valuable resources. The decree's influence extends beyond just military matters into civilian imperial governance as well. The knowledge that there exists some ultimate solution to any crisis has affected the way imperial administrators approach seemingly intractable problems. Rather than seeking compromise solutions or accepting partial defeats, they often pursue total victory, even when it might not be the most efficient approach. This has led to both remarkable achievements in imperial governance and spectacular failures. On the positive side, imperial administrators have accomplished impressive feats of organization and logistics that might not have been attempted if they had been more willing to accept limitations. On the negative side, the pursuit of perfect solutions has sometimes prevented the implementation of good enough solutions that would have been more practical. The question of whether the decree should be destroyed rather than used has been raised by some of its guardians over the millennia. If the solution it contains is truly so terrible that it should only be used as an absolute last resort, perhaps it would be better to destroy the document entirely and remove the temptation to use it. This position has been argued by those who believe that the very existence of the decree creates a moral hazard, making imperial leaders less likely to seek alternative solutions to crises. They argue that knowing there is always one more option available has made the Imperium complacent and overly willing to accept risks that might be avoided if the decree did not exist. However, this position has been countered by those who argue that destroying the decree would be the ultimate betrayal of the Emperor's trust. He created it for a reason, and destroying it would mean abandoning whatever solution he had prepared for humanity's darkest hour. They point out that every crisis the Imperium has faced so far has been resolved without needing to open the decree, suggesting that its existence has been beneficial rather than harmful. The psychological profile of individuals who can be trusted with knowledge of the decree has been studied extensively by Imperial psychologists and interrogators. These studies have identified specific personality traits that seem to correlate with the ability to handle such terrible knowledge without breaking down or becoming a security risk. Individuals who score highly on measures of emotional stability, sense of duty, and ability to compartmentalize information are more likely to be suitable guardians of the secret. Those who show signs of curiosity about forbidden knowledge, tendency toward depression, or inability to keep secrets are considered unsuitable regardless of their other qualifications. This psychological profiling has become increasingly sophisticated over the millennia, incorporating techniques developed by the Inquisition for identifying potential chaos, corruption, and heretical tendencies. The selection process for new guardians now involves extensive psychological testing, psychic examination, and monitoring of behavior under stress. Even with these precautions, there have been several cases where individuals entrusted with knowledge of the decree have suffered psychological breakdowns that required intervention. In some cases, memory modification techniques have been used to remove knowledge of the decree from individuals who proved unable to handle it. In extreme cases, more permanent solutions have been necessary to protect the secret. The development of cover stories and false explanations for the behavior of those who know about the decree has been another ongoing challenge. When high-ranking Imperial officials display the psychological stress associated with guarding such a terrible secret, it becomes necessary to provide alternative explanations for their behavior that will satisfy the curiosity of subordinates and colleagues. These cover stories have included everything from fictional family problems to manufactured health issues. In some cases, entirely fictional conflicts or crises have been created to provide plausible explanations for the stress and anxiety displayed by the decree's guardians. The creation and maintenance of these cover stories requires extensive coordination among those who know the truth. The question of what would happen if knowledge of the decree's existence became public has been the subject of extensive planning by Imperial security services. While the contents of the decree remain secret, even the knowledge that such a document exists could have profound effects on Imperial society and the morale of Imperial forces. Contingency plans have been developed for dealing with various scenarios of information compromise, ranging from limited leaks among high-ranking officials to complete public disclosure of the decree's existence. These plans include everything from disinformation campaigns designed to discredit leaked information to more extreme measures involving the elimination of compromised individuals. The psychological impact of public knowledge about the decree would likely be enormous. On one hand, it might provide hope to Imperial citizens facing seemingly hopeless crises, knowing that their leaders have access to some ultimate solution. On the other hand, it might create despair and nihilism as people realize that their leaders are preparing for scenarios so terrible that they require unthinkable solutions. The balance between these potential effects has been carefully studied by Imperial psychologists and sociologists. Their conclusions suggest that public knowledge of the decree's existence would be more harmful than beneficial, confirming the wisdom of keeping it secret. However, these studies also suggest that in truly desperate circumstances, controlled disclosure of the decree's existence might be used to bolster morale and maintain order. The technological aspects of the decree's protection have evolved over the millennia as Imperial technology has advanced and new threats have emerged. The original psychic wards placed by the Emperor remain the primary protection, but additional layers of security have been added to address new potential vulnerabilities. These additional protections include advanced biometric scanners that can identify authorized individuals through multiple means, temporal locks that prevent the decree from being opened during certain time periods, and even more exotic defenses that use technologies recovered from ancient human ruins or captured from alien species. The maintenance of these technological protections requires the ongoing involvement of the most trusted members of the Adeptus Mechanicus, who must be granted limited knowledge of the decree's existence without being told its contents. This has created an additional security challenge, as these individuals must be carefully selected and monitored to ensure they do not attempt to discover more than they need to know. The integration of new security technologies with the Emperor's original psychic protections has proven to be extraordinarily difficult. The ancient wards are so complex and powerful that adding new elements risks disrupting the entire system. Each new addition must be carefully tested and calibrated to ensure it does not interfere with the existing protections. As we stand now in the closing years of the 41st millennium, with the Great Rift tearing the galaxy in half and demon incursions erupting across thousands of worlds, the Terminus decree remains sealed in its ancient vault. The weight of its terrible secret continues to burden those few individuals who know of its existence, while the vast majority of Imperial citizens remain blissfully unaware that their leaders possess such a doomsday option. Captain General Valoris still stands guard over the decree, his weathered face bearing the lines of stress that come from carrying such an enormous responsibility. In the quiet moments between crises, he sometimes stands before the sealed vault and contemplates the terrible choice that may one day fall to him or his successors. The knowledge that he possesses the power to implement whatever final solution the Emperor prepared weighs heavily upon him, even as he prays that such a choice will never become necessary. The return of Robert Guilliman has added a new dimension to the burden of guarding the decree. As the Emperor's son and the current Lord Commander of the Imperium, Guilliman represents the highest authority short of the Emperor himself. Whether he knows of the decree's existence remains unclear, but if he does, he carries that knowledge with his characteristic stoicism, giving no outward sign of the internal struggle such knowledge would create. The philosophical questions raised by the decree's existence continue to trouble Imperial theologians and scholars. How can they reconcile the existence of such a terrible contingency plan with their faith in the Emperor's wisdom and benevolence? How can they maintain hope for humanity's future while knowing that the Emperor himself prepared for the possibility of its failure? These questions have no easy answers, and different individuals have found different ways to cope with them. Some have embraced a fatalistic philosophy, accepting that terrible choices may sometimes be necessary for the greater good. Others have doubled down on their faith, believing that the Emperor's plan will ultimately succeed and the decree will never need to be opened. Still others have found comfort in the belief that the decree represents not an admission of failure, but the ultimate expression of the Emperor's love for humanity, showing that he was willing to prepare even the most terrible solutions to ensure their survival. The Terminus decree remains one of the greatest mysteries of the Warhammer 40,000 universe, a dark secret that casts its shadow over everything that happens in the Imperium. Its very existence speaks to the depths of desperation and pragmatism that characterize the grim darkness of the far future, where even the greatest heroes must prepare for the possibility that heroism will not be enough. Whatever terrible solution the decree contains, whether it involves the destruction of terror, the surrender of humanity to chaos, or something even more unthinkable, it represents the ultimate backup plan of a species fighting for survival in a hostile universe. It is the final card to be played when all others have failed, the last hope when hope itself seems lost. And so the Terminus decree waits in its ancient vault, protected by wards and secrets, guarded by individuals who bear the weight of terrible knowledge. It waits for the day when all other options have been exhausted, when the very soul of humanity hangs in the balance, and when someone must make the most terrible choice in the history of the species. Until that day comes, if it ever does, the decree remains sealed, its secrets safe, its power held in reserve for the darkest hour yet to come. The story of the Terminus decree is ultimately a story about the price of survival in the grim darkness of the far future. It reminds us that in a universe where there is only war, even the most noble and heroic civilizations must sometimes prepare for choices that go against everything they claim to stand for. The Imperium may preach about the sanctity of human life and the glory of sacrifice for the greater good, but the existence of the decree suggests that there are limits even to these noble ideals. Perhaps that is the most terrifying thing about the Terminus decree, not what it contains, but what its very existence tells us about the universe of Warhammer 40,000. In a galaxy where such preparations are necessary, where even the most powerful and wise beings must plan for scenarios so terrible that they dare not speak of them, there truly can be no peace among the stars, and no respite from the endless war that defines existence in the far future. The decree stands as a monument to human desperation and determination, a testament to the lengths that people will go to in order to survive. It represents both the best and worst of humanity, the willingness to make any sacrifice for the survival of the species, and the terrible pragmatism that can justify any action in the name of the greater good. In the end, the Terminus decree embodies everything that makes Warhammer 40,000 such a compelling and terrifying vision of the future, a universe where hope and despair are inextricably intertwined, where the greatest heroes must prepare for the most terrible choices, and where salvation and damnation are often indistinguishable from one another.